Kate Mila Fáilte, which means in Gaelic 100,000 welcomes.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
History is a nightmare from which one must awaken.
Hello, and you're very welcome along to the third episode of Deep Diving with myself, Malachy Murray. I've been practicing. And I've been practicing because of a very special man, a man that has opened up so much in my own life, and we hope in your lives too, in terms of learning about our past and the lessons we can learn from the ancient folklore, the spirituality, and indeed our very own psyches. I am talking, of course, about the reincarnated druid that is Mr. Balor OBrien, ladies and gentlemen. Balor, you're very welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Balor, I see the beard is now red. You have a new design on your forehead. You're looking a lot brighter and less mysterious. You're looking, can I even venture to say, you're looking more humane.
It must be the fact we're coming into the spring and summer is approaching that maybe my mood is more uplifted.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in saying that, I believe you were out and about yourself in the forest. You went back to nature. You were climbing trees, as we can see here, having fun, groping the trees. Was that what you were doing?
Reconnecting with the trees. We are all part of nature, and it's important to take time to bond, not just with other people, but with animals and with plants and trees.
Just with that one, were you pretending to be a bat? Upside down, you look a bit like Batman. Yes, and yeah, the other one there. Can I ask a question? If there are people out walking in that forest and you are hanging upside down from a tree, dressed as you are they disturbed, or do they think they're part of some sort of local theatre production?
I think a lot of people are intrigued, and there's an awful lot of people.
I see what you did there. Intrigued. Tree. Just take note. That's great. That's great. We'll keep that one. Go ahead.
Yes, so a lot of people are intrigued by our connection with nature. And it's something that we, I suppose, are self-conscious about, and we're afraid of revealing too much about our interest. But everyone is inherently interested in where we come from and feeling connected to the past. So it is something that it gets pushed down a lot. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the last couple of centuries and maybe the societal norms that have kind of repressed a lot of the pagan culture and tradition. But it's all there bubbling just under the surface. And
of course.
There's plenty of people who are happy to climb trees and swing upside down with me.
And of course, reconnecting with nature and reconnecting with who we truly are. That is what we are trying to do here on Deep Dive with Malachy Murray. And we want to thank you, Balor, from the pits of our own psyches for your contribution to reawakening our inner souls that have been downtrodden and neglected all of these years. We are coming into the spring equinox, which reveals that there is the equal amount of day and night in a day. I believe that is March the 21st. But before March the 21st, here in Ireland, on the 17th of March, we mark a very famous day, the day that honors the memory and the life of one Saint Patrick. Balor, Tell us all about Saint Patrick.
Well, we should always, I suppose, start with the basics of what people associate St. Patrick with today. So the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that, well, it's not a fact, but it is said that he abolished snakes in Ireland and that he brought Christianity to Ireland.
Sorry, Balor, your hood is just falling down at the back. Could you just, it's just revealing your hairline. Could you just pull it up a small bit? If you just pulled it up a bit, it's, yeah, that's much better, much more believable. Keep going, please. Yes.
So one big contribution he had to Irish society is he introduced Christianity to a great number of people. And they say, and they celebrate him for having removed demons and monsters and evil spirits from many, many parts of Ireland. There are many locales that are named after him up and down the country. And they say that he brought enlightenment to many places. But
and just in saying that, I suppose a lot of names in Ireland are directly related to Patrick himself. Pat, Patricia, Paddy, Pa, Patrick. My middle name happens to be Patrick, Malachy Patrick Murray. Just wanted to point that out.
And PJ.
PJ, of course, yes, there's a lot of... please continue. Fascinating.
Yes, so he is a character that there's been an awful lot written about. And I would say we misinterpret an awful lot of his contribution to Ireland, because I would question how good he was. We're celebrating him on the 17th of March every year, his contribution, but I would ask, what was his contribution? Because we'll say he started off, his first association with Ireland was supposedly when he was captured by pirates and enslaved for 6 years on the island here.
Yes.
Maybe his motivations to come back were revenge.
You believe that there were Irish pirates that treated him poorly on their ship sailing the seven seas, and because they were Irish, he came back to Ireland to gain revenge on these said pirates. Is that what you are accusing the patron saint of Ireland, sir?
No, that is completely false.
That's a pretty strong accusation, and you would really need to back that up. You believe that Patrick was like a disgruntled girlfriend coming back to put the bunny, as it were, into the metaphorical pot of boiling water.
No, St. Patrick was a slave. He was captured by pirates, and he spent 6 years as a slave, shepherding as a shepherd in Mayo, and he fled. I believe that his motivations for returning to Ireland may not have been as altruistic as we have been led to believe. That he may have had revenge in mind for a culture and a people who he wouldn't have had fond memories of.
Well, I think you would have to agree that if anyone was forced to stay in Mayo for 6 years, they would be righteous in their grievances, would they not?
Well, I wouldn't like to offend anybody who...
It's a moot point, but one that should be noted, I think, in the whole context of the man's life. In terms of the demons, What exactly are you referring to with regard to St. Patrick? Did he come into a town and actually actively look for demons in the nooks and crannies of pagan Ireland? They may have resided in the fairy forts, indeed in the trees. What do you think he did when he came into a town? Did he go to these places and beat them with his big staff?
Well, he didn't exactly do that. With his staff, the stories that are told are that when he came to a new community who he intended to convert to Christianity, he would trust the staff into the ground where it would remain until he had successfully converted the entire community. I believe on one occasion he was encountering some resistance, and it was so long, so much time had passed that the staff had actually gained roots and wouldn't come up out of the ground for him.
Did it become a tree?
Yes.
Is that tree still present to this day in Ireland?
I haven't located the exact tree yet, but when I do, I will certainly let you know.
I'd imagine it would be a very big and magical tree. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, at this stage, if it's still if it's still there, it would be 1,500 years old, so it should be a substantial size at this point.
We're very aware that there still are metaphorical snakes in Ireland, most residing in Dole Éireann. Hello, lads. But what about the actual reptilian snakes that existed on the island of Ireland before St. Patrick came? What were they like? Were they indeed evil spirits residing in these snakes, or were they just getting along with life, enjoying themselves, biting the odd person, poisoning people, and just trying to get by as snakes before this begrudged slave came to the country?
Well, snakes are a great, I suppose, to look at, I suppose, as a way of looking at people. Like, they're very much good and bad within them. And in Ireland, we had many stories of supernatural beings, and many of those were actually snakes, or they would have been called, some of them were called great worms. And some were water-based, some were like some resided in the sea, some in the rivers, the lakes, on one or two occasions in caves and mountains. And St. Patrick certainly did pursue these creatures with particular gusto, and it would lead me to wonder whether there was some incident while he was in Ireland previously that led him to take such a, I suppose, an aggressive stance with snakes or serpentine creatures. For example, there was one creature that resided in a lake in Donegal, and St. Patrick, when he was visiting the area, searched for and located this particular snake, which would have been, it wouldn't have been a normal snake, it would have been a supernatural creature. And he had no qualms with killing it, and its blood actually filled the lake and turned it red. So that lake is actually called Loch Derg, not the same as the one bordering Tipperary, Clare, and Galway, but a much smaller version of that. And yeah, I mean, it's one of many tales of St. Patrick taking on and killing serpents.
Fascinating. In terms of the size of the snakes, were they python-esque? Were they little wormy, snaky things that we just call snakes because they resemble snakes? Did they come in all shapes and sizes? And coming back to the symbology, was St. Patrick jealous of the size of certain snakes compared to what he espoused himself?
I think more than likely he would have been very envious of many of the snakes, because the tales are that many of them were gigantic. There would have been some smaller, but I mean that would be to be expected. But in general, if you're comparing St. Patrick's snakes, they would be considerably. He wouldn't have been. He wouldn't have had bragging rights if he was.
Of course, and there is no comparison. Of course, you have the giant anacondas in Brazil. You have again the Indian python, which is rather large. So I'd imagine that the snakes of that time were pretty sizable and slippery. So I could only imagine the type of jealousy that was amongst the male folk when these buggers would slither into the community and show off their girth and their length and all that kind of thing. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. St. Patrick, then, he's been given a lot of praise, unwarranted praise, because he's given rise to a lot of hurt in this country, hasn't he? If he didn't come, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that exist to this very day. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is when he came here to convert people, he didn't go to the poor people, the poor communities first. He focused on women and wealthy women in particular. And we say the local lords, the kings, the wealthy merchants in the area that he was visiting, they were the people he targeted. Now, not all of them converted. I mean, we had pagan traditions throughout Ireland for hundreds of years after St. Patrick's time, but he did have a huge impact, and he did convert thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. And I would actually say that there was an awful lot of negative to come out of this, because the pagan society in Ireland would have placed equal status to men and women. You had an awful lot of rulers who would have been women, and there was no perception that there should be any distinction between men and women in society in terms of fulfilling roles, in terms of positions of power. And ultimately, when St. Patrick brought in this new religion, what he did was ultimately create a patriarchal system in Ireland, which had led to a lot of subjugation of women through many centuries.
Yes, wonderful. That was a bad thing. That's what you're getting. So. Yeah, you're getting at. Okay, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, down with that sort of thing. So the shamrocky kind of St. Patrick that we see today, a big green hat, a white beard, godly, saintly looking person. What do you think the real St. Patrick looked like?
I think the real St. Patrick was probably a very ordinary looking man. There's no description of him being exceptionally large or strong or having vibrant red hair or any distinctive markers. Mm-hmm. I believe he was probably very much what distinguished him was his staff and probably his get-up. I mean, we've carried this belief or this emphasis on the color green, associating it with St. Patrick. So I would imagine that he must have worn green, a lot of green.
Or maybe it was a reflective clothing, and when he walked through a field, it was the reflection of the grass from the clothes. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that actually happened. I'm going to share something with you now, Balor, about my past. Many moons ago, I used to attend prayer meetings, And within these prayer meetings, St. Patrick was discussed quite a bit. And there was one lady who claimed to speak directly to the saint, formerly known as the prisoner in the pirate ship. And she used to speak to him using a technique called glossolalia. Have you ever heard of glossolalia?
No, I have not.
Glossolalia is speaking in tongues. Now, speaking in tongues is what one does. It comes from a biblical term where you are speaking to another person, but you are speaking in your own language that is only understandable to you. So this lady would get up in the middle of a prayer meeting quite suddenly and quite shockingly and run around the room and exclaim the same speech through tongues. Now, she did this over weeks and weeks and weeks, and it became ingrained in our minds. And everyone that attended that prayer meeting knows the actual speech that she said, but we just can't understand what it means. Now, if I could I share that with you, seeing as we are talking about St. Patrick? And this is a live experiment, ladies and gentlemen. We haven't discussed this beforehand. Would it be possible for me to repeat the speech that she made, and maybe you could connect with it and understand what it means, and maybe you could revert back to me? Could I try it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Just from what I remember. It was quite breathtaking to see the exact same speaking in tongues speech that the lady made every week for several weeks at these prayer meetings. And that's exactly what she said. Bala, over to you. What do you think that was?
Well, I don't think we should repeat. I did understand that, but I don't think we should repeat it on the air.
It was disturbing, was it? Maybe you'll tell me after the show. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
if you like.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to that. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for indulging in that moment of magic.
Again, about St. Patrick, because he's such a big figure. He dominates this time of year. And I would like to get some clarity on why exactly we should be remembering him. So this is a man who brought a religion which essentially steamrolled over the connection we had with nature and our connection with the spirit world, our sense of spirituality, our connection with the natural world. It has all been lost to time, and that time has been spent living in the shadow of St. Patrick and what he did to the country. There were, to mark some very important pagan figures, even shall I go on? I think I shall. Some of the important figures in Ireland would have been, well, they would have been important for local areas. Like we were speaking about Ineen Bui last week, she was an incredibly impactful person in her community, and she lived after the time of St. Patrick, and her contribution existed for many centuries after him. But eventually, the influence of the church grew too great, and it was able to kind of, I suppose, suppress and absorb an awful lot of these pagan local religions or cults. And I would have to acknowledge there was some benefit with the learning centers, with the churches that were built It's reported that St. Patrick was responsible for the founding of over 300 churches. But I don't believe that the poor would have seen much change in this, because the leaders of these churches were often members of the royal families or the nobility in the area. Sláinte.
Cheers. I couldn't let the occasion of talking about St. Patrick and leading up to St. Patrick's Day without the patron saint's favorite drink. So I'll just let that settle there. Go ahead, Bala. You were in full flow when I was overcome with the idea to grab a little tin, a little bit of a tipple. Go ahead, sir. Fascinating.
Yeah, as I was saying, the Christian religion and even St. Patrick himself, he wasn't necessarily welcomed by all members of the community, and he wasn't welcomed in all communities, but he did have a very calculated strategy to infiltrate certain communities, such as Downpatrick in County Down, and many others across the country, particularly in the southern half of the island. And again, we live with the consequences to this day. I would even go as far as to ask, because why he came back to Ireland is this claim that he heard a voice, or that this figure, this apparition, appeared to him, and it told him to come back to Ireland and to bring Christianity. Well, it's possible. It's certainly possible that he spoke to some supernatural creature or spirit, but I would question the motivations of such a being. Perhaps it was one of the many creatures that exist in the other world of Celtic folklore, and perhaps he had an agenda of his own in which he was able to use Saint Patrick as a tool or as a weapon in his moves against other creatures, because, as we discussed already, Saint Patrick did pursue particularly serpents, but he pursued many supernatural creatures all across the country. But there are many others that he never came into contact with. So I would wonder if that was because he was being maybe directed and used to an extent by one of these supernatural beings.
Do you think St. Patrick spoke in tongues himself?
It's very possible he may have been a parcel tongue.
Could he have been the originator of tongue speaking in Ireland? I do think it happened with St. Paul in the Bible.
I'm sure he wasn't the first, but he would surely be the most famous.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, I suppose next week we are discussing St. Patrick again, and I would like to, I suppose, let everyone know that we will be delving into specifically some of these stories and my theories and my beliefs on exactly what St. Patrick did. And
sorry, theories. Just so everyone is aware, theories he meant to say there.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So that's what we have on St. Patrick this week.
Yes, next week we can discuss more in more detail. It was
good.
Yeah, we'll delve into, I suppose, this creature or this voice that spoke to him, and again we will delve into who that was, their motivations, and what they actually sent St. Patrick here to do.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Balor, your knowledge knows no bounds. But now, sir, it's time for my favorite part of our conversation, and that is Barlows Private Eye. Now, for Barlows Private Eye, Balor tells us a little bit of gossip about the local occult people that live in his vicinity. Within your 5K, I do believe, Balor, are they?
Yes, I would never follow anyone outside of 5 kilometers.
Lovely. Is that a spiritual belief or because you'd be arrested?
I wouldn't follow anyone out beyond 5 kilometers.
It's a good way to live. Please tell us what is happening in the locality with these weird people.
So last week I spoke about a strange conversation I heard in the woods between two gentlemen who were enjoying some, I suppose, a smoke. And one of them was recounting his tale of an experience at the lunatic asylum in Ennis. And following that conversation, I was interested myself, and I went to explore the area. Now, I would have been familiar with it before, but he described a window that I have not seen previously, leading into the asylum basement. So I did actually go with my own dogs, and I walked there every day just in case I would see something.
We have
now,
a picture.
on Wednesday,
We have a picture, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
There's the picture there. It
There
is
it
a
is.
frightening looking place, and a hole that is a real hole. It's black in there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been inside myself, but we could certainly send you in with a rope and a torch, Malachy.
Very good.
So I did actually on Wednesday. I saw Ben, the man who had been traumatized, I suppose, by his experience, and he didn't know me from Adam because he hadn't seen me the last week. So I actually just followed him because he was looking very, very nervous. And while he did approach the asylum, he did keep a distance from it and kind of stayed to a row of trees leading up the driveway to the main building. But as I say, he didn't get too close, and he kind of very quickly moved on. So I decided to follow him and just see if anything had developed with the story since I was since we'd spoken last week. And so he did actually return home. I assume it was his home. It has the look of a commune. It's a collection of small to medium houses on a piece of land with a beautiful garden and its own vegetable patches, and they had a variety of animals. So they had chickens and dogs and cats and turtles and fish in a pond, obviously. And I didn't care to venture in because I didn't want to intrude, I suppose, or startle him, because based on his account last week of discovering a cult, he may have been spooked by someone approaching him. But in any case, my curiosity got the better of me, and as I was leaving, I did notice that two women were leaving, heading towards town, which was the same direction I was taking, and so I followed behind them, and I wasn't able to hear much, just snippets of conversation.
Did you have your mask on and the makeup, as it were, as well as the monk hood at this time when you're following these people? Just for my mind's eye.
For your mind's eye, you can take it that I was wearing the mask. I'm always wearing a mask out in public.
Okay, go ahead. Nothing wrong with that.
So I did follow the ladies, and they did stop for, I suppose, a talk or a chat on the way to town at the Fair Green. Now, when they got there, I was able to, I suppose, position myself on the other side of a wall to overhear what they were discussing. They were discussing Ben and a little bit of concern over his behavior following that incident with the asylum. Neither of them seemed to be fully aware of what had happened, but one of the ladies, named Jane, she seemed to be particularly perturbed by his behavior. And the other lady, Sarah, she did mention something interesting that I wrote down. A quote, I just thought it was particularly noteworthy, where she said, "There's always weird shit going on in town." And I guess Jane was curious to know what she meant by that. So Sarah told her a story about one night at a cemetery in Ennis, a small cemetery on a hill called Curravorn Graveyard, where she'd gone with her boyfriend, I presume, several weeks earlier. And they had heard some sort of a ruckus, some strange sounds, some banging noises. And they were a little bit disturbed by it, and they actually departed very, very quickly. And when they turned back, they saw, I suppose, at the end of the lane, this rather large cloaked gentleman stepping out of the little, there's a little sty in the wall to avoid opening the gate, as it makes a terrible screeching sound. So they did see this figure who they hadn't seen enter, and they were I suppose at that point very glad to have already been exiting the cemetery and the area at that point. Now, she did say that that wasn't her only experience with it. She said that even before the pandemic we find ourselves in now, there was another time where she and several friends were in that cemetery, and again, I suppose they were probably doing some sort of social gathering there, and they heard this enormous crash behind them late at night, like a huge crash, as if a stone slab was being slammed down behind them in the cemetery. Now, they jumped, obviously, and turned to look, and just in the shadows, they thought they could see a figure moving out from behind a tombstone. And he, I suppose, I don't know where he came from, but he didn't seem to realize that there was anybody in the cemetery. And the ladies, I think, Sarah produced a flashlight, and when she shone it in his direction, the man fled, escaping down this dark hole at the back end of the graveyard. And again, I suppose she was startled, and she and her friends, they didn't dilly-daddle. They made a quick departure. But one thing she did note was that as they were passing and leaving that time, last year, I believe, she did notice one of the tombstones seemed to kind of slide slightly as they passed it. Now, she thought it might have been a trick of the light, or maybe paranoia due to the situation. But needless to say, it did startle her. And I suppose her recounting that to Jane, I suppose, kind of dismissed it, saying, "Well, you and Ben are probably just smoking too much." But I just found it very interesting that we're coming across different events, different stories happening in different parts of the town, all around lunatic asylums and old cemeteries. And I'm just wondering who is this? Who is it that's wandering in these places, and are they connected?
Strange characters lurking in the local shadows. And that's it for another edition of Balor's Private Eye. Thank you very much, Bala. Thank you so much for sharing all that you share. You give us so much, and I feel that, you know, someday we shall repay you in kind. Maybe monetarily, maybe I might buy you a pint. But in some sense, I do feel that I owe you so much. So from here, in my wonderful studio, soundproofed and all, I want to send you this message, sir. And that comes from here, okay? Bala, seeing as we're finished with St. Patrick for this week, and we shall return and dive even deeper into the man that was the patron saint of Ireland, I'm going to read the first verse of Hail Glorious St. Patrick from Daniel O'Donnell lyrics page. And just as a little treat for the viewers, you might translate the words through tongues. Would that be a possibility?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, here we go. Hail, glorious St. Patrick, dear saint of our isle. On us thy poor children bestow a sweet smile. And now that you're high in your mansions above, Erin's green valley, look down with your love. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Deep Diving with Malachy Murray.